All right, we have made it. Sorry, I made everybody sit through that long countdown, and nobody's really watching right now because we didn't announce that we're going to go live, but here we are nonetheless. Hey, everybody, welcome. My name is Kevin DeLong with Cyber Social Hub. This is Matt Danner, by the way.
Hello.
Hey, there's Matt. He's with Monolith Forensics. He's just a booth right across the way from us here at IASIS in Orlando. So appreciate you guys either tuning in live or watching later on as we go. But we have an interesting topic that we thought we needed addressed. And actually, Matt came up with the topic. It's a pretty good one. Is storage concerns, and what are you doing with your digital assets? Right, assets,
Assets.
not sense. Yeah,
Your digital evidence data.
I don't think ass is considered a swear word on YouTube. I hope not, because they're going to flag me.
I don't think so.
Because it's a dog.
If you can say it on The Simpsons, you can say
Yeah,
it
we're
on
good.
YouTube.
I hope so. Because if not, I'm going to get my first strike. Whatever.
Yeah, who cares? You're not a real YouTube star unless you've had a few takedowns and strikes.
We're definitely not YouTube stars here. I have my reading glasses.
I guess
here.
YouTube professional.
How many YouTube stars have
YouTube
reading
professionals,
glasses?
is what I should say.
Right. So it looks like people are starting to get back from lunch. That's what it's obviously. It's 12:42 here on the East Coast, and everyone's going to start funneling back in for lunch. So I apologize if it gets a little loud because we were kind of tinkering around with some of our cool sound effects and stuff that Matt has now discovered where the buttons are at on the board.
And me and Kevin are pretty popular around here, so people may stop and just say hello and not care that we're recording, and we may have to like pause and.
We may have to just say that Matt's the popular one because people just keep walking by when I'm sitting here. Unless you want to get a hold on, I'm starting to reach. Unless you want a koozie, we have Cyber Social Hub koozies, so that's why they're walking by. So like I said, we are at IASIS, but if you've never heard of IASIS, go check them out. And you're a digital investigator of any type, they have some phenomenal training courses here and the things that you can learn at this event. I posted a picture. I don't know if it went out on social yet. I don't know if Abby's posted it out yet, but I went in while all the students were away on lunch and took a panoramic view of the room. I posted one in Cyber Social Hub, so if you remember, go check that out. You can see it right away. But if not, then you can catch it on social, whatever. But it's massive. It's like 323 students. Plus,
that's just the BCFE class.
Yeah, that's just this one.
There's like a dozen other courses that are going on that probably have another couple hundred.
Yeah,
students.
I think it's what they said. All in all, with instructors and students, it's over 700.
Yeah,
people just hanging out in classes all day,
yep.
And it's not like a normal conference that we would go to. It's literally training classes.
Yeah, it's a training conference, and like Monolith is a gold sponsor at IASIS. And I've been a member myself for over 10 years. I got my CFCE back in 2014. And if you're listening to this and you haven't gotten a CFCE from IASIS, I highly recommend it, primarily especially if you're testifying, like in law enforcement or in the private sector. What's good about the CFCE is the process you go through to get it. It sounds really good when you're qualifying as an expert in court. Just because you take the 2-week course, you get assigned a peer mentor, you go through several problem sets that takes you a few months to get through, and then you end it with a capstone set of certification exams. So, if you're looking to do some more testifying and you're worried about getting qualified, having a CFC credential really helps because it just sounds good to. If you're explaining to a bunch of jurists that don't know anything about forensics, they hear you went through this process to become a certified professional. It makes it pretty hard for anyone to say you're not qualified after that point. So, so that's the primary reason I recommend it to people, is because of that process, and that's why IASIS has had this event for so long, is just because of that.
Yeah, and it's no joke. It's no joke because now I've been to some training. I won't mention any names. That you go through this training, and all you have to do is basically sit there and listen for
go for a week and
5
then take
days
a test on your own afterwards.
And it's not even, some of these aren't really a test. It's like, oh, here's your certification. You've passed. But this one is not like that at all. It's challenging.
It's a process.
Yeah.
And it's not just simply an exam. It's a process where someone else has to approve you to move through it. Like, you're not just like putting yourself through it. You have somebody who's already a trained, qualified professional basically signing you off on every step of the process. So, to me, it's definitely not easy. Like, it's definitely, you have to dedicate a decent amount of time to it. You have to really focus on it, and put a decent amount of work into it. But once you have it, it's worth it, because it just shows you've attained a certain level competency that's hard to describe with
Right.
a lot of other certifications and training. So
Yep. And to me, now it's open to others other than law enforcement. Back in the day when I went through in '07, it was law enforcement, and this was the certification to get. And now I still think it is, even
Yeah.
in the.
I think it's starting to gain some popularity in the private sector. The problem, ICE has always been primarily a law enforcement based organization,
Right.
but
Right.
I think since ICE has started bringing in more and more training from outside vendors and things like that, it's becoming more popular with the private sector. And I worked in the private sector for years,
Mhm.
and
Right.
that CFC has always been a huge, a big important thing to me in my professional career. So before I started Monolith, so I think it's also just a fun event to come down to. You come to Florida. If you can afford, basically if you can allocate the time to it, you spend 2 weeks in a pretty fun environment at a nice hotel. There's a great pool here.
Oh yeah.
You got Disney and Universal Studios just right down the street.
Literally.
Tons of great restaurants
SeaWorld,
in the
like
area.
close to, right there. It's amazing.
So it's just a good place to, if you can allocate some time to it, I'd say definitely do it if you can.
Yeah, I mean it's great. Like when I come down, I duel it. The family comes and they do the fun stuff while I'm here and you and I are hanging out.
Yeah,
Not
definitely.
to say this isn't fun, Matt,
Also,
but it's not universal.
That's one benefit that we haven't said yet is that you can meet us in person.
That's right.
I mean, think about that. That's worth the cost alone. I mean, it's me and Kevin. I mean,
that's right.
God, it'll change your life if you meet us. I mean, that's.
Yeah, you'll get to see us in person. That's I can give you swag. That's about all I can do, and we'll drag you onto the show as
I'll give you a pen and then try to sell something to you.
That's right. I do have your pen. I don't know what I did with it though.
Yeah.
I have it. Oh, we have a bunch of these. For anybody here at the show that's signing up, I'm sorry I got them in like a girly purse right here. But I got a ton of the challenge coins that we're giving away as people sign up to be new members. So we've gone literally in 2 days. Yeah, 2 days. It's not even full 2 days yet. We've gone on over 100 already. So it's pretty good of people. So I'm glad I brought a lot of those.
Yeah, we always run. I mean, I tend to at our booth. I tend to buy really good swag, so our stuff disappears pretty quick. I think Joey over there just at our booth. After our first batch of pins disappeared, he just took the rest and hid them and was like, "We're not giving any more out."
Right?
People just,
what's he doing over there?
He's doing work.
Oh, no, I don't think he's working. I think he's watching us. Let's see if because there's like a 5-second delay. We'll see if he's watching. Then he'll wave over.
Oh yeah, that's true. He might be.
Nope, he's not.
I should. I guess we could send him a link so he can.
Yeah,
he
just
can watch it.
Nah, he's pretty bored.
We'll let him be. He can watch it at 2:00 later.
There you go. But this one's actually now. It's live.
That's right. Yeah,
this one's going out. So we
So-
talked about the whole no swearing thing in advance. Except
Let me. I'm going to text him real quick.
yeah, go ahead. I'm going to yap
You
about
can
this.
yap for a few minutes.
So what we're going to talk about eventually, and that's kind of the way it always goes, is storage and the importance of it. And I was telling Matt prior to us going live here was, that was our biggest challenge. Especially, I came from a really small police department with there's no budget to speak of when it came to digital forensics. Of course, when I was doing it, it was still the dark ages. So there wasn't a whole lot of solutions out there unless you're going to go enterprise solutions, something like that. And one of the solutions that we came up with was the first one. We used a commercial, wasn't really commercial, it was a prosumer NAS box.
Mm-hmm.
I have one, right? No, I don't. It's a different one. So I don't want to call them out by name because it died like shortly after using it, and it was painful. Their customer support would not help us get information back. It was horrific.
Yep.
So what I ended up doing was I again, no resources, went to our IT department for the city and said, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. And they were recommending all this enterprise Windows solutions and stuff like that. And I'm like, I can't really afford that. Thanks. So I got an old NAS box. I think it was a ton of bays in this thing. I don't remember how many it was. And I loaded ZFS up on it, which is really nerdy because I really wanted to do it because I wanted to learn how ZFS worked. I had no idea. And I learned ZFS, which is not something I would, if you like nerd stuff, do it. and then it actually worked. That thing was amazing.
Well,
it buzzed through it.
ZFS is a file system that was designed specifically for large storage arrays. Because before that, basically most NASs were just piggybacking off of, different either NTFS or different modified versions of NTFS like BTRFS and things like that.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know, I think it was Sun Systems developed ZFS. Same group that has Java.
Yeah.
I think so. I might be wrong about that, but yeah, it was a file system specifically made for, ZFS is assuming that it's being installed on a RAID, some kind of storage array system with multiple drives, multiple nodes, things like that. But yeah, when it first came out, it was pretty complex. Now there's tooling and actual entire frameworks that you can use, like TrueNAS and other things that manage that stuff on a UI level, so you don't need to do everything by command line.
Yeah, you had mentioned that TrueNAS to me. I want to go back and look at it again and revisit some.
Yeah, so TrueNAS is an open source ZFS based operating system, basically, that's meant to be used to manage large storage arrays. So if you're used to using something like Synology has Synology OS.
I have Synology at home.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is basically, TrueNAS is just an open source operating system used with ZFS systems.
Really?
And they sell, so not only can you use and manage and install their OS on your own for no fee, but they also make storage arrays as well that are just pre-configured, so you can buy them directly. But this kind of gets into the meat of what we're going to talk about, which is, the big, which you mentioned earlier, which is when we're managing. So let me take it back to the beginning. So what we're seeing with Monolith, since we talk to lots of labs, we help them manage their forensics labs, and our software helps you manage, just the work that's going on, the evidence that you're taking in, you're releasing, your cases that you have working, your case notes, who's working on what, all that stuff. What we're hearing a lot of, though, is just labs having different problems with storage, and it's everything from my hypothesis on this is that the forensics industry is fairly new still as an industry, so it's only really about 20 years old. And if you think about it, you give it 10 years to ramp up in terms of how many forensic labs exist. Because that probably hit an equilibrium about 10 years ago, and now you've got all these labs that have existed, including in law enforcement, for 10 plus years now. So what's happened is different jurisdictions have different statutory limitations on how long they're supposed to store adjudicated case data,
Right.
And now, at this point in time, you got some of these labs that have been storing data for 10 plus years, and they're running into a real problem of like, okay, well, we've already got a room full of drives, and we're just going to have to keep adding to this mountain of drives. And a couple of problems occur. Either you're tossing everything on Blu-rays, and you just got a closet full of Blu-ray discs, or 2 or 3 years ago, you convinced your department to drop 100K on a large storage array, and you're already about to fill it up, so you're about to go through that process again. Or you may have a small, like Synology NAS that maybe is 50 terabytes, and you're gonna have to buy another one or look at more storage.
Like I said, small, 50 terabytes,
well, nowadays,
which it is for digital evidence, right?
Nowadays you can buy, if you're smart about it, you can buy a 50 terabyte NAS, Synology NAS, for only about $2,000, right?
Yeah, they're pretty reasonable.
As opposed to 10 years ago, that same rig would have cost you like 10,000. So,
and you really need that storage because, like this Mac that I'm using, right, to feed it in is a terabyte. That's one of those. And you get 50 cases. Guess what? You're full,
exactly.
right?
and that gets into a whole other, that's something we'll probably have to address in the future about maybe reevaluate our imaging standards. Is it really necessary to image an entire drive now? Like, do we really need to do that? But that's another podcast episode.
So that's another fight we can take on with someone from old school.
Right. and the problems we run into is if you're a lab that you have the resources, you can probably afford to buy more servers, more storage. You probably have IT folks that can dedicate their time to managing those arrays, making sure they're healthy, making sure they've got fresh drives that aren't going to break all the time. But most labs don't have that luxury. So what they're doing is just kind of buying off-the-shelf storage rigs, putting them in the lab somewhere. And there's two general problems that they're going to run into. One is redundancy is not the same as backups. So you may have like a 2-drive redundant system, but that's not the same as a backup. It doesn't cover acts of God. It doesn't cover issues where you have some catastrophic failure of the storage array. One of those catastrophic failures is something like you see some of these labs, they have a a 100, 200, 300 terabyte storage array, and it's just sitting on a shelf, and it's just one rusty screw away from completely destroying all of their evidence, right?
I've seen that.
So,
and I know some of our listeners are probably like, huh, that kind of sounds like mine. Did Matt peek in our server room?
It's
there?
just a loose board on a
right.
on a wire frame somewhere, and it's just kind of like, well, hopefully this wireframe rack stays together.
Right.
And you don't want to walk in the office one morning and just see all of your stuff like just all over the. You got people making funny faces at us.
Yeah, I know, right? Hecklers.
Hey, we're brave enough to actually be on a podcast, so you guys like enjoy yourselves drinking soda.
They're hiding. We should flip that camera and watch them run. Is what I'm thinking. Is just spin that thing around. They'll be like,
but so the point is like these are the choices that people are going to start being faced with especially long-term labs have been running for a while, and they've been collecting a lot of data. And one of the things that we're working on, that we're doing research that we're trying to get some feature sets out is, can we make this storage management problem, can we build a software solution for it, right? Which is what we're playing with right now is inside of Monolith, we're generally finding in our research that there's two sort of columns of storage. You have hot storage and you have cold storage, right?
Right.
So hot storage is data that you're working with all the time, that you need access to right now. It's probably data that you're sharing with your detectives and your investigators, things like Accelerate reports or data that you've exported from phones or computers that you want investigators to have access to. And that's stuff that you're working with right now, and that's that hot storage component. The other component is cold storage, which is usually that's going to be the larger bulk of data that you're done with the case, you've worked it, maybe it's adjudicated, or maybe your part in the case is just done with, and you've got 3-4 terabytes on the case that you now have to figure out statutorily where you're going to put this stuff. So depending on what you're doing, most labs are probably just storing it locally in one of these various storage solutions we brought up. Some more sophisticated places are putting them on drives and maybe storing them off-site in like off-site storage warehouse locations or whatever. What we're working on is building out a solution that takes advantage of some online storage archiving solutions that are ultra cheap, that we can store just tons and tons of data online, where we utilize other providers to provide the redundancy, provide the backups, provide the encryption, all those things that you basically have to implement yourself on-prem,
right?
And just basically put a software layer on top of it. So instead of like having to find a drive to put stuff on, you just click a button, select the folder that you want to archive, and just let Monolith archive it for you. Set a purge date for it so that Monolith can let you know when, hey, this data is coming up on its purge date. Give you that notification and let you know it's time to get rid of this stuff, and then you just click a button and delete it, and then you're done. And that's the
that's nice. Yeah.
Basically, we're trying to build a solution like that where it effectively reduces your entire management of that process to a few button clicks. And I think we found a way. I think we found a solution. I think we built a solution that works, and we're still working on it and trying to get it out. But that's the software solution. That doesn't mean you have to use what we are putting together, but your choices are: you either habitually and continually manage your online your storage on facility, at your lab in perpetuity, and constantly buy new equipment and apply new resources. And I think once our system comes out, I think there's a good chance that cost efficiency wise and ease of use wise and the amount of management, the small amount of management that's required, I think it's going to become really, really popular with folks, because it's going to, they're obviously going to pay us, but when you do the math, you compare it to all the resources you would have to spend on managing these large storage array systems and things like that. Because it's not simply, you have the retail cost of what it costs to buy the stuff, but then you got to think about the man hours it takes to manage it.
It's a different animal.
Because the more drives you have in that array, the more storage nodes you have, the more drives you have that fail throughout their time, and you got to constantly keep up with it and make sure you're, you may have a 2-drive redundancy, but if you don't know when one of those drives fails, now suddenly you're effectively at a 1-drive redundancy, and now you're just waiting until the day that for some reason that network drive won't work anymore, and then you realize, oh crap, we had 2 drives fail and our array is busted. So there's things like that you have to take into account when you're managing, potentially hundreds of terabytes of data on-prem. And that's what I'm trying to do is provide a solution where it makes this process a little bit easier. It's like, yes, it's going to cost money, you're going to pay for it, but in the long run, it's going to be an easier, hopefully cheaper solution than what we're doing now with a lot of these labs.
Oh yeah, I mean, for sure. And my thing was, obviously I was in law enforcement a number of years ago, and I still think there's some concern about this. And you're closer to the actual element because you're
Yeah.
dealing with law enforcement directly now. Is their hesitancy in some agencies, not all, some have embraced it. The cloud, right?
Sure.
Is, you know, is my evidence safe? Is that information gonna be there? Who has access? Things,
Sure.
questions like that. And that's, I think, really is what it's just an educational
Yeah.
thing. It's like, hey, it's okay. It's not, someone working at a fast food joint that's going to be sifting through all your data.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
that's not the way it works.
Well, and it's what helps with these conversations is to just be honest about it,
Mm.
right? It's like, well, let's be honest. Like if you store data with us at Monolith, like we're going to have a level of access to it
Mm-hmm.
just to manage it for you and just to basically be able to provide adequate support. But it's not like everybody in our company has that. We know we have access controls for only certain. Specifically, I have the keys to the kingdom where I'm the only one that can access everything that's most sensitive. But
Mm-hmm.
there's that piece of it. Then also there's the piece of, we'll tell you what providers we use. So if we're using a certain storage provider, we'll tell you it's AWS or it's AWS GovCloud, or maybe we're using Cloudflare for certain types of storage.
Mm-hmm.
There's that piece of it. So you know exactly where everything is going. The other piece too is there's technology where we can implement if we need to. If it's extremely sensitive, we can implement even certain levels of encryption where data is encrypted before we even see it. So that you provide potentially you provide a set of encryption keys that you want to use that you control,
Mm-hmm.
and then what we get is just a bunch of randomized data. So there's nothing we can do with it either. So there are ways to solve these issues that effectively make the cloud a lot more palatable to government agencies and even private agencies as well. When you're talking about storing custom, especially when we're talking about archive data, this is not data that's being processed in the
Right.
cloud. It's not data that's being we're not reading it live or anything like that. It's just literally just bulk storage that we're just trying to just get it out of our lab and store it somewhere where we know it's secure and safe. Storage like that is like a great candidate for let's just encrypt it on the client side so that what we're storing is just a bunch of zeros and ones.
Yep.
We don't know what it is. We can't even decrypt if we want to. That way, if it ends up, if AWS has some massive data breach, which would probably be one of the worst data breaches in history, to be honest. But if it happened to happen, it'd be like, okay, it's not a big deal. Like the data you gave us is encrypted with your own keys, so it doesn't matter. So there's solutions to that problem that can be addressed. But even if we don't do that, you got to think about, we're always going to be in this place of we're trading a little bit of security for convenience, safety, and cost efficiency, right? Yep. And it's just going to be up to every organization, both public and private, as to how much of that, security do they want to lose. And I would even argue, in a lot of cases, there are certain risks that you have by storing this on-prem that you may not even realize are far more riskier than the little bit of security access you're giving away by storing stuff online.
Right. And let's I'm looking at our time here. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some of those solutions for smaller agencies that you mentioned some of the Synologies, some of the stuff that you can get. Anything that comes top of mind, maybe someone, if they're in a pinch and it's like, man, I need some storage.
I'm a huge fan of Synology. I have a personal Synology NAS at home.
Yeah, so do I.
And I mean, you can't beat that. I mean, it works out of the box.
Great.
You buy it, you grab some drives, slap them in there. It does everything for you. It has a great operating system. It has great apps that you can add on to it. A Synology box system is basically just a Linux box.
Yeah.
So you can even SSH into it and do Linux stuff.
Sure, absolutely can.
So if you're just looking for a drop-in, like, oh, we need 100 terabytes of storage like tomorrow, just go to Amazon, buy a Synology array, and buy. The most expensive part is going to be the drives.
Yep.
Like the boxes themselves are not $1,000
because they do come empty unless you buy a bundle. Yeah.
But if you're filling it, if you're buying a Synology box that has 8 bays in it, and you're going to go buy 8 20 terabyte drives, I mean, you're going to drop a few $1,000 just on the drives.
Oh boy! So don't go buy the off the shelf in Best Buy type drives. And you got to get what are they? Reds?
Yeah, there's every manufacturer of hard drive has NAS rated drives. And that's another important thing. You don't want to just buy random drives. You want to make sure you buy.
Don't do that.
So like Iron Wolf from Seagate's really good. Western Digital, I forget. I think they have the golds, but then they also have a NAS rated drive model.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Hitachi, I think has some of them. The other thing I would recommend too is I don't recommend buying them from Amazon. And I'll tell you why. If you can buy them from Newegg or if you can buy them directly from another manufacturer, I would recommend doing that. And because I ordered a bunch of drives from Amazon and you can't really tell where those drives are going to come from. And the first batch of drives that I got were just randomly put in a box with like no padding or anything. So
Oh my
about
gosh.
half the drives were busted
Oh, man.
before I got them. So I spent about a week.
Oh man.
I plugged all the drives into the NAS and spent about a week figuring out which drives were working and which ones weren't, which is another great reason to have Synology because it runs hard drive diagnostics and can tell you when drives are having
all the time. Yeah.
read issues. And yeah, so by ordering them from Amazon, I literally just got a box with like 8 drives just like bouncing around in the box. And like half of them were broken when I got them. So
That's not good.
they were clearly like refurbished or repurposed drives that weren't in the original packaging, and they just wrapped just one layer of bubble wrap around each and then threw them in a box.
Nice.
So
at least it just wasn't newspaper, you know.
So I would recommend if you do buy from Amazon, you can get around that problem by like basically purchasing each drive individually, basically one purchase at a time. Because then what happens is they'll put the drive in its own container. It's like a hard drive based container. But if you buy them like 8 at once, you have the chance of them just for some reason they just I guess the warehouse people just don't know what a drive is and they don't know that it's like
I can't remember where I got
sensitive
mine.
or something.
I think I might bought mine direct.
Yeah,
I can't remember, but it came in a nice. Actually, I bought 8 drives, and it came in this like foam drive holder, like 20, but there's only 5 drives in it or 8 drives in it.
Yeah,
and I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah. And that's also what's cool about Synology too. You don't have to fill up. You can buy like a 10 bay or 12 bay Synology system.
Yep.
You don't have to fill it up with drives. You can start by just putting 5 drives in it and then just add drives to it over time.
Yep.
And they use I think they use a proprietary file system that is capable of being expanded. And then also most Synology units, you can buy expansion units that plug into a proprietary port.
Yeah, you absolutely can.
Where you can add additional storage hardware to it as well. So,
yep. Because I was looking in my Synology to add some more RAM, and I know they're finicky about adding some of that RAM. And then they have the what's that other RAM called? The NVE.
You're thinking of the NVMe cache.
Yeah, so the cache, I went ahead and bought. I think it was a full gig of that, along with it. And man, that box is smoking fast.
So the thing about the cache, again, most of our listeners are probably not going to need the cache because what the cache does, the cache helps if you're doing a lot of constant sequential reads. So most of the time what's happening with us is that you're going to be reading a hard drive image or something or a phone image directly from it. And that's just, you're reading the same data over, but you're reading different data over and over again. Mm-hmm. What the cache helps with is if you're using it as a file server, where you have lots of people accessing different files all the time, that helps with the cache because then the cache can literally store copies of like a Word document. And the next time the user wants to access that Word document, it's already in a fast memory cache location, and it just returns it a lot faster than having to read it from the entire array. So for forensics, if you're using your Synology just to read big, chunky forensic files, the cache isn't super helpful in that case because it's not going to be able to cache that entire file anyway, and you're only reading it generally like once. You don't have multiple people like accessing that forensic image enough times to warrant it being sitting in a cache location. But it helps a lot if you've got like a video editing server or a document storage server where you got tons of people accessing documents all the time. That's where you would want to use that.
We use it for video, mechanism. And we can actually push files. We can edit files right on it because ours came with, I think there's 4 Ethernet on the back, which is insane to me. And
that's another great thing too.
Bridge them all together.
You just and there's that's another great thing.
Yeah,
and most of these units have 2 to 4 Ethernet ports. You just plug them all into your network switch, and now you've got 4 gigabit, a 4 gigabit pipe to and from that Synology. So, which is great because even if you don't have a 4 gig network, it doesn't matter because now you can have 4 computers accessing that Synology at 1 gigabit each by having those 4 ports on it. So, so that's like, and what's great, that's what makes Synology so great because it's just plug and play. If you're doing
so easy.
If you're doing 200, 300 terabytes, Synology is great. It starts getting a little trickier once you need to scale past that. because then Synology's doesn't work great, or it doesn't work that well when you're getting into like huge amounts of storage. That's when you need more complex server array setups. It takes a lot more.
Yeah. And another option
engineering
is
and things.
someone can build their own.
Yep.
If you have some skill set, I mean, build your own.
Yeah.
It's going to take your maintenance. There's a little trick. It's not as easy as Synology, but I mean, I did it. Would I recommend it? No. If you have budget, if you can go beg for money somewhere,
I
would do that.
If you're a real nerd about this stuff, because the risk that you run by doing it yourself is if you don't know how to set up a RAID properly, if you don't get the right RAID hardware, if you don't know which drives to buy, if you don't have something in place that tells you when a drive is having issues, all these things that come into play that these storage arrays have to be finely tuned, well monitored systems, because you cannot afford to lose. And the first thing I've seen is make sure you understand what RAID systems are and how they work and what the RAID configurations are, because you want to make sure you pick the right one and make sure that you have enough drive redundancy so that you don't kill your array if one drive fails. But that's the risk if you build it yourself. There's just a lot of learning to do before you set it up to make sure that you're setting it up properly, so that when things start to fail, you have enough room to fix them and get them back up and running before you have real data loss.
I just thought of that. We go to a lot of these shows. I see you at every show I go to. You're there. And that's one thing I don't see a lot of is storage solutions that are out there. People that are selling, it's like, hey, here's this storage rack, buy us and keep all your evidence safe.
It's probably a missed opportunity by some of these manufacturers.
I think it is, for sure. I mean, even just all the data, because, I look down through here and
it's all about processing.
Nope. And nope. Yeah, I mean, it's all about getting your evidence. Now yours is managing. It definitely is. But I'd be interesting to see as you get closer to your solution. We'll bring you back on and talk about it, because that's definitely for sure a challenge in the world.
And what's funny about it is the solution we're working on, it's actually, technically speaking, it's not that hard to develop. What we're trying to do is we've got the tech stack sort of built, but what I'm doing research on is trying to find the most cost-efficient way to do it. It's like, okay, we can clearly do this. We've already built a prototype, but is the current infrastructure we're using the most cost-effective we can use? Can we find, because when we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of terabytes people potentially storing, even small efficiencies can really add up to a huge savings. So that's the phase that we're in right now, is trying to figure out, okay, where's the best place to put this stuff? What's the best configuration to use? And how can we make this to where it's significantly cheaper than just setting up your own on-prem storage array.
Right. And, one more thing I wanted to bring up, and, I told us this, we'll probably go 15 minutes. Yeah, we're at 35 minutes already. We're going to keep talking because I got more questions. Is, one of the methods that early on we were told to do, and I know now is just really not the best practice to do, is just when you have an image, or back in those days, we'd clone the drive, right?
Sure.
And we'd keep that then in storage. In drive, that's maybe not the best way, because drives are designed to be moving, and just sitting there doing nothing, I heard, is not necessarily good. Now, I'm not a hardware guy. I don't know the answers to that question. But, and I still see people doing that today. And I'm like, oh, man, I hope your room's really controlled humidity-wise. It's like...
Yeah, I would say old. I mean, it sounds old school, but I would probably rather store static data on like Blu-ray discs than on mechanical hard drives.
Yeah.
Because mechanical hard drives, they have complex internal mechanical components, and they can fail and they can get old over time. And the other problem with just storing it on a hard drive and sitting it on a shelf for years and years and years, you will never know if that drive is working anymore until you plug it in.
Right.
So that's why you actually, if you're going to use hard drives for storage, you really do want it in a live running server, because that server can monitor the drive's health, and over time you can fix and replace drives that are starting to break down. Whereas if you're putting it in a drive that's just dead on a shelf for years and years, by the time it comes to, if you need to use it, like, you're like, oh, let's see if it boots up. The other thing I want to mention too about that is flash storage isn't really any better either.
No.
Because over time, the way that flash storage works, it's basically just an electrical charge that's being stored microscopic capacitor, right? And if you know anything about physics, you know that in reality, no system is perfect at efficiency. So things like storage drives that use flash technology over long periods of time, those little capacitors are slowly but surely leaking a little bit of that charged storage that it's having. So it's not clear, I don't know if there are clear metrics for this, but you could put store data on a thumb drive, and if you put it in a spot for 10 years, there's a chance that the data is no longer there after 10 years if you've never plugged it in. So every time you plug in that flash storage, it gets that jolt of power and electricity to run, and it's now just recharged those cells that are storing data. But if you don't do that and you have it on a shelf for 10 years or something, there's a chance that the data is just going to self-erase over time, basically. So
that would really suck.
And I when I was in college, I had an engineering professor that brought this up. This is how I learned it, and he said he was a guy that worked at IBM for like 40 years, and he had a Mercedes.
Yeah.
And the Mercedes, like the remote system getting the Mercedes, the battery had died, and he had 2 keys, and it took so long for the first key's battery to die that when he grabbed the other one, the key didn't even work anymore. Because it wasn't because the battery was dead, it was because the battery to the other one had died so long ago that the internal storage had wiped itself because it had never been energized again. So so he had to go take the keys back to Mercedes and get them to reconfigure them to the car. And it was funny because he was explaining, because he was a hardware engineer at IBM, where this is literally what his PhD is in. So he knew exactly what the problem was, and he explained it to us in the course to say, this is why storing things long term on dead flash storage is a bad idea, because over time you're risking just the data just being lost due to bit rot that's caused by the leakage of energy from the storage cells.
Yeah. I've never heard of that explanation before. I've heard of the gate not being able to open and close. It won't ever close like completely anymore, and eventually it starts losing its ability to.
That's if you're using it constantly.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
that's from overuse, right? That's another whole problem.
So
but
I've never heard the.
This is for long term. This is a long term storage problem with flash storage. So generally, when you're storing things for long term, you want them running on live systems or systems that do not typically degrade at like the human scale, right? So things like Blu-ray drives and stuff, that's not something I don't think is going to degrade within a human lifespan. That's something that may degrade over hundreds of years rather than tens of years. So it's old school, but like it actually makes more sense when you know the engineering behind some of the storage tech.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, they're very good. Matt, thank you so much, man. We're at 40 minutes right now, and we said 15. So, it's a good topic, though. We could probably talk quite a while on it yet. So, hey, I want to have you back on, and when you get closer to your solution being deployed, we'll let people know about it. It's a phenomenal idea. Definitely something everyone in the industry needs.
Yeah, definitely.
Storage is a huge issue. I mean, it was a huge issue back when I was doing cases years ago, and the drives were only getting bigger. And like you said, there's got to be a better solution than getting the whole drive. I know some people probably do logical, pulls or imaging, but I was always afraid of, hey, am I missing that other key piece that may be over here? If you do a logical, then I have to go back and try to get it.
It's a discussion for another time, but it comes back to, you have to think about, you have your common cases that happen almost every time, and then you have your edge cases. And, you have to think about how often do those edge cases occur. You have to think about your own history, your own experience, and like, how often do we actually run into these situations where we collected an entire hard drive and then months later we came back to look at some very specific thing that ended up being important that we never look at, right? And those are questions that I don't have an answer to.
Yeah.
All I can do is suggest the thought experiment and have everybody else think about it and kind of decide, like, what do we do?
No, you can drop it in the comments below, right? If you have an idea or suggestion. I keep forgetting. I get lost that we're actually like broadcasting out right now in the conversation. And I didn't even look to see if anyone's watching. There are people watching. Nice. Oh my gosh, I'm not even paying attention to the chat.
Comments?
We are, and I'm so sorry. Rich is on there. Rich, are you supposed to be working somewhere? Yeah. Oh, he's standing right over there now. He must have made it earlier. Hey, there's Alexis right there. Yeah. He was on the show. And so Rich is on. Rich is like over there now. And then Jared was on from, oh my gosh, why can't I remember the name of the company? Atrio, ArtPoint. There we go. It came back to me. Like, my brain's getting too full, Jared. Sorry about that. And then, yeah, got a couple of regulars on here too. We're
Nice.
still going live at 2, by the way, guys, too. Matt's the warm-up show.
Yeah,
Get
that's
the
right.
audience on board. This is a great topic. So again, thank you for hanging out with me, man. I really
Sure.
appreciate it. If you guys haven't checked out Monolith Forensics, make sure you do so. It's just monolithforensics.com,
Yep,
right?
that's it.
Make sure I got it right.
Yep.
Phenomenal. Everyone needs case management. Trust me. I used spreadsheets when I was in my lab, and then, it was horrible. This solution makes it so much easier. Go check these guys out. And again, Matt, thanks so much for hanging out with us. We're going to be going live here again at 2:00. I think Gene is supposed to be coming, and he may be not on till like 2:30 or so, because I know he's got some meetings that he's got to go to. And we're going to be talking about, I think the next topic is some tips and tricks to get started. How do you get started in digital forensics? Well, now there's a couple different roads than what was before, but it should be a good show. So, Matt, thanks
Cool.
again, man.
Yeah, anytime.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, take care, guys. We'll see you back here at 2:00. Thanks.